I romanticize the life of an outlaw. Bad guys.
James Spader was never meant to be liked, and that's exactly why Hollywood could never control him. While other actors chased applause, approval, and box office safety, Spader made a career out of playing men who unsettle you, the kind who smile while dismantling your sense of comfort. From privileged sociopaths to seductive manipulators, his characters don't ask for sympathy. They dare you to look closer. For more than 4 decades, Spader has operated on the fringes of stardom, rejecting the traditional hero's path in favor of something far more dangerous: moral ambiguity. He didn't want to be admired. He wanted to be felt. And audiences over 50, who have seen Hollywood cycles rise and fall, recognized something rare in him, an actor unafraid to expose the darker mechanics of power, desire, and identity. But what truly shaped this obsession with discomfort didn't begin on screen. It started much earlier, inside a world of privilege he chose to abandon. And that decision changed everything. James Spader's story doesn't begin in struggle. It begins in comfort. Born in Boston to 2 teachers and educated at Phillips Academy, one of America's most elite prep schools, Spader was groomed for power, not performance. This was a world designed to produce senators, CEOs, and judges, men who wore authority effortlessly. And that's the irony. Spader didn't rebel against privilege by becoming reckless. He rejected it by refusing to use it as protection. Dropping out at 17, he abandoned a future that would have guaranteed respectability. Instead of college lecture halls, he chose New York, back rooms, and manual labor. These early years shaped his understanding of hierarchy, how power is assumed, how it's enforced, and how quickly it collapses when stripped of symbols. This is crucial, because Spader would later specialize in playing men who look powerful but are quietly unraveling. He understood them because he'd seen the machinery up close and chose not to inherit it. From the very beginning, James Spader made a choice most young actors were terrified to make. He chose discomfort over charm. While his peers worked tirelessly to be likable, approachable, and safe, Spader leaned into arrogance with surgical precision. In films like Pretty in Pink and Mannequin, he didn't just play the antagonist, he embodied a specific kind of menace, the privileged young man who never questions his right to control the room. His cruelty wasn't explosive or theatrical. It was casual, effortless, and that's what made it so unsettling. Spader understood something early on that Hollywood often misses. True power doesn't announce itself, it assumes compliance. His characters didn't need to raise their voices or justify their behavior. Dominance came naturally to them, as if it were encoded in their upbringing. Audiences recognized these men immediately, not as movie villains, but as people they'd encountered in real life. The boss who belittles with a smile, the classmate who humiliates without consequence, the executive who destroys careers without ever breaking a sweat. Hollywood labeled Spader a villain and tried to box him in. But Spader was playing a longer game. He wasn't interested in evil as spectacle. He was obsessed with entitlement, how power disguises itself as confidence, how privilege convinces people they are right simply because they can be. That insight became the foundation of his entire career, and he never abandoned it. Sex, Lies, and Videotape didn't simply launch James Spader into critical acclaim. It fundamentally rewired how audiences understood male danger on screen. His character, Graham Dalton, wasn't loud, threatening, or physically imposing. He was calm, intelligent, disarmingly polite, and that's exactly why he was terrifying. Graham didn't force intimacy. He engineered it. He turned confession into a transaction and vulnerability into leverage. Spader played him as a man who had intellectualized desire so thoroughly that emotion became a controlled experiment. What unsettled viewers wasn't what Graham did, but how reasonable he seemed while doing it. There was no melodrama, no obvious pathology. This was a man who could sit across from you, listen attentively, and quietly extract pieces of your inner life without ever touching you. His power was psychological, and Spader refused to soften it with moral commentary. He didn't ask the audience to condemn Graham, he asked them to sit with him. The film detonated at Sundance, won the Palme d'Or, and instantly crowned Spader as an art house force. Yet the real victory wasn't the awards, it was validation, proof that audiences were willing to engage with complexity, ambiguity, and discomfort, and that an actor could thrive by making people uneasy rather than reassured. After that breakthrough, James Spader stood at a crossroads most actors dream of reaching. He had credibility, attention, and options. Stargate confirmed what Hollywood already suspected: he could carry a major studio film. He was articulate, appealing, and capable of playing the intellectual hero. The path toward conventional stardom was wide open, and just as predictably, Spader stepped away from it. Rather than build a career on accessibility, he treated mainstream success like a controlled trial, useful, informative, and ultimately disposable. He returned instead to erotic thrillers and psychologically dense dramas, choosing projects that examined obsession, paranoia, and self-deception. In films like Bad Influence, White Palace, and Crash, Spader wasn't playing characters so much as systems. These men were carefully constructed identities, defensive architectures designed to survive emotional instability. Hollywood struggled with him because he refused to simplify. He wouldn't flatten his characters into heroes or villains, and he wouldn't dilute complexity for broader appeal. Instead of chasing mass approval, Spader accepted the risk of being misunderstood. That choice made him difficult to market, but impossible to replace. Quietly, almost invisibly, his refusal to compromise turned him into something far more valuable than a star. It made him essential. Secretary represented the moment when James Spader's long fascination with power, control, and vulnerability finally crystallized into something complete. As Edward Gray, he portrayed a man whose polished authority concealed profound emotional damage. In the hands of a lesser actor, the role could have slipped easily into cruelty or caricature. Spader chose the opposite approach. He played Gray with stillness, precision, and emotional restraint, allowing silence and hesitation to reveal what dominance was hiding. What emerged was not a predator, but a deeply fractured human being struggling to name his own desires. The brilliance of Secretary lies in its refusal to moralize, and Spader was central to that choice. The film does not lecture the audience about right or wrong. Instead, it asks viewers to observe, to question, and to sit with discomfort. Power in this story is not imposed, it is negotiated. Control becomes meaningful only when it is mutual. By never signaling how the audience should feel, Spader elevated the film beyond provocation. He transformed taboo into exploration. By this stage of his career, his reputation was unmistakable. James Spader was no longer just an actor drawn to dark material. He had become Hollywood's most precise interpreter of forbidden psychological terrain, using discomfort not to shock, but to reveal truth. Television ultimately gave James Spader the canvas that film rarely could. As Alan Shore in The Practice and later Boston Legal, he created one of the most layered and unsettling characters in network television history. Shore was a man who understood that morality could be argued, reshaped, and weaponized. He treated the law not as justice, but as language, something to be bent by those smart enough to control it. Spader's performances turned courtroom speeches into psychological battles, each monologue delivered with surgical rhythm and quiet menace. What elevated the character beyond intellectual showmanship was vulnerability. Beneath Shore's bravado lived a man acutely aware of his own moral erosion. His bond with William Shatner's Denny Crane revealed moments of unexpected tenderness, especially resonant for older viewers who recognized the loneliness beneath the wit. For audiences over 50, Shore wasn't just entertaining, he was familiar. A reflection of intelligence sharpened by age, disillusioned by institutions, yet still hungry for meaning and connection. With this role, Spader proved something rare. He could achieve mass popularity without surrendering complexity. He didn't simplify his edge for television. He brought his edge with him, and network TV was better for it. Raymond Reddington in The Blacklist was James Spader in his purest form, a distillation of everything he had been circling for decades. Criminal, philosopher, confidant, predator. Reddington existed at the intersection of charm and threat, and Spader inhabited him with absolute control. What could have been a standard network villain became something far more dangerous, a man who spoke beautifully while committing unforgivable acts. Spader turned exposition into performance, transforming long stretches of dialogue into hypnotic monologues that commanded attention. The plot often paused so Reddington could speak, and audiences leaned in. For 10 seasons, Spader anchored primetime television without ever flattening the character into something safe or easily digestible. Reddington remained morally opaque, emotionally elusive, and intellectually dominant to the very end. That consistency was rare in an industry that rewards reinvention through simplification. Off-screen, Spader mirrored that same refusal. He avoided the rituals of celebrity, protected his private life, and offered few explanations for his choices. He never tried to clarify himself for public comfort. In a culture obsessed with likability and branding, Spader built a career on resistance. He didn't pursue admiration or applause. He pursued understanding of power, of identity, of human contradiction. And that is why his legacy endures. Long after trends collapse and stars fade, audiences remember the actors who challenged them, unsettled them, and forced them to think rather than relax. James Spader's career stands as a quiet rebuke to everything Hollywood usually celebrates. He never chased youth, likability, or easy redemption arcs. He didn't reinvent himself every decade to stay fashionable. Instead, he stayed consistent, almost stubbornly so, returning again and again to the same questions about power, control, desire, and identity. Over more than 40 years, Spader didn't just play unsettling characters. He mapped a territory most actors were afraid to enter. He showed us how intelligence can become a weapon, how charm can disguise cruelty, and how authority often masks deep emotional fracture. What makes Spader truly rare is not talent alone, but intention. He understood early that fame is temporary, but a point of view can last a lifetime. Every major role, from entitled prep school villains to Alan Shore to Raymond Reddington, feels like part of a single, ongoing investigation into human behavior. He never asked the audience to like his characters. He asked them to recognize them. And for viewers over 50, that recognition cuts deeper. These are not fantasy monsters. These are people we've worked with, argued with, trusted, feared, and sometimes become ourselves. In an era when entertainment increasingly aims to soothe and reassure, Spader chose to disturb. He trusted his audience to sit with ambiguity, to resist simple answers, and to engage with discomfort rather than escape it. That trust is why his work still resonates. Trends change, formats evolve, but the need to understand power and our own relationship to it never disappears. And that's why James Spader's legacy won't fade quietly. Long after louder stars are forgotten, his performances will continue to provoke discussion, disagreement, and reflection. He didn't just entertain, he challenged. He unsettled. He made people think. And in the end, that may be the highest achievement an actor can claim. If you enjoyed this deep dive into James Spader and the psychology behind his most unforgettable roles, let me know in the comments what performance affected you the most. Don't forget to like the video, it helps more than you might think, and subscribe if you want more long-form stories about Hollywood figures who refuse to play it safe. Your support keeps this channel alive, and I look forward to exploring the next enigmatic career with you.